Fight Mike here. Today we're going to be chatting through some of the future matchups for Ilia Topuria after his beautiful knockout win over Charles Oliveira at UFC 317 this past weekend. I've been seeing a lot of people online talking about Ilia like he's prime John Jones with the power of Ngannou and a chin like Marvin Vettori, as he's got such an aura of invincibility at the moment. But obviously, like all fighters, he has weaknesses and tendencies that people can target. And I think at the moment we just haven't seen him put against the right matchups to sort of show those weaknesses. And there's a lot of fighters that are going to be on this list that will give Ilia Topuria some problems. A lot of them he'll beat, mind you, but I just sort of wanted to point out some of these future matchups and some of the issues that they may pose, or just if Ilia Topuria is going to be able to absolutely smoke them. The people on this list range from a couple of featherweights, a couple of lightweights and welterweights, people that actually could come into his bracket. And I'll just start off straight away with the people who will be easily dispensed of in the first two rounds without it being too competitive. I have Justin Gachi, Dan Hooker, and Paddy Pimblett. I think all three of these guys would probably get finished in those first two rounds. Starting off with just Justin Gachi, wades forward with a bit too little footwork. If you want to beat or at least survive against Ilia Topuria, you need a bit more footwork than Gachi has. He's very ploddy. He comes forward. He's very set in his stance. We saw the person who was able to last the longest that wasn't Josh Emmett, being Max Holloway, going to the third round. He was able to use good footwork and actually stay alive due to that against Ilia Topuria. Another thing about Gachi is that he's very hittable. Body shots are always open against Gachi. He's not very tall and he ducks down, making himself a shorter target, being sort of the perfect perfect height for Ilia Topuria to be able to lay off some shots. And when he gets hurt as well, he's not especially composed. He sort of just puts his head down, starts throwing overhands. And the thing about Gachi is that back in the day, he might have been a bit more difficult for Ilia due to the leg kicks and the head kicks, but he doesn't throw that many kicks anymore. And to be honest, I really think Topuria would smoke Gachi quicker than he would any of the other opponents. I think he would be quicker than he was able to sleep Charles, because Gachi's not going to go to the grappling straight away. So I think that he would be able to get Gachi out of there within the first minute or so of the round. Maybe 2 minutes of the round. Moving on, we've got, I would say Paddy Pimblett would be the next worst opponent for Ilia Topuria. Much like Gachi, his footwork is very slow. He's also really hittable in exchanges. He doesn't duck like Gachi, but he also stands completely upright, much similar to the way that Charles stands. And although he will pose a threat in the grappling, I ultimately don't think his takedown threat or his jiu-jitsu is better than Charles, so I think that he has no chance there. And he's got a really good chin, but it just gets tested really regularly, and you don't want someone who gets hit a lot to be fighting Ilia Topuria. And his stand-up's not very powerful or scary, so it's not going to be able to keep Topuria off of him. The knees, the elbows might help him in this, but I just don't see it working for him. And I just think that Pimblett would get finished maybe 3 minutes into round one, maybe 4 minutes into round one. Dan Hooker as well would get finished in the first two. I think he's the most hittable out of these three, but I think he has the best footwork out of these three. I think you can't be a guy who just like wades into the pocket if you're going to be fighting Ilia Topuria. And although Hooker gets hit a lot, he can also work the outside game maybe for a round or so. And I think he would get finished in like early parts of round two. I think it would look like how Chandler caught Hooker, where he's moving backwards with his chin high in the air, and then Topuria will press him up against the cage and land one shot that'll just be able to sleep him. But I think, though, out of the three here, I think Hooker probably does the best with his teep kicks. He'll use his leg kicks a lot more. He has got a really good chin. I would say he's got a better chin than Gachi, probably a similar chin to Pimblett. And I just think that he would be better at using his range than Pimblett will be. So I think he might be able to make it to the second round and then get smoked. Moving on to the next bunch, I've got two people in the next group. And these ones are the ones that might have a little bit of success at the start of the fight. Maybe the first round, they were able to do a little bit of work. But later on in the fight, they get finished. This is both Mobsar Evov and Arman Tsarukyan. I think Mobsar is very defensively sound. He doesn't get rocked too much. He got rocked against Arnold Allen, but Arnold Allen's got really fast hands and he's deceptively good at fighting on the feet. And the thing is about Mobsar is I just don't think he would have the strength to actually take Ilia down. He does have the lighter man skill, because by the time if they ever fought, it would be Mobsar coming up. He's a big dude for featherweight, definitely bigger than Ilia, but he's not, I wouldn't say he's stronger than Ilia Topuria, but he's really defensively sound. He's really clean. He doesn't try and go for too much. He doesn't throw many shots that are leaving him open. And he's very relentless. For those first 2 rounds, I don't see him getting finished. I could see him just constantly shooting for takedowns, not really giving Ilia any space, and not really even standing with him on the feet. I think he would do a lot of stalling against the cage because he wouldn't be able to get Ilia Topuria down. And I think that anyone that Ilia is fighting that has the ability to shoot under his big shots will be making him slightly more on the back foot, or just slightly more hesitant to throw his shots, just because he knows that the takedown will be coming. And he'll have to use more feints to draw out their bad takedowns. He'll have to work more methodically than like a Charles Oliveira, who's going to sprint forward and give his chin on a silver platter. Neither of these guys are going to do that. They're both going to try and wrestle. They're both going to be scrambling. They're going to make sure that he's pressed up against the cage. They're going to spend as little time as possible in the boxing range. And they're both pretty smart fighters. I think that it's a very similar breakdown between the two. But I think Mobsar Evov wouldn't be able to get him down in the first 2 rounds. Probably holds him against the fence. I don't think he would win any of those first 2 rounds. And then early into the third, I think that Topuria will be able to finish him. Either just getting him off of him against the cage and then teeing off on him and finishing him. Or I could just see him out damaging him in the 3rd round and then just finishing him due to like body shots or something after the takedowns stop working. And then against Arman Tsarukyan, the only difference between that and the Mobsar Evov fight is that he kicks a lot more than Mobsar. I think he would have more success with the high kicks. He would probably be making Ilia Topuria think a little bit more. I think he's also stronger than Mobsar, so he would probably get Ilia Topuria down in one of those first rounds. And he's also short like Ilia. I think they're both around the same height, very similar build, and he's very stout, so he's going to be able to maybe topple over, or at least compete with the hips of Ilia Topuria. I think he will be able to stall out the first two rounds, maybe winning one of them, holding him against the cage and taking him down, but he's going to shoot so many panicked shots as soon as they get back on the feet. And he hasn't got the same cardio as a Mobsar Evov, and I think that he's going to get gassed out midway through the 3rd round, coming into range, maybe shooting another takedown, and I could see Ilia being able to catch him with an uppercut as he's sprawling the takedown, sort of like he did against Bryce Mitchell. And I think he'll be able to take him out maybe as he's going for the takedown, or if he stuffs it, they'll get back to the feet and he'll hit him with a clean hook, like Arman Tsarukyan got hit with against... Can't remember the name of the opponent, but I know it was a short notice fill-in. It was 3 fights ago, and Arman got rocked against this guy who was not nearly as good on the feet as Ilia is. So I think Ilia would be able to catch him with a left hook in the 3rd round, knocking him out cold after he gets really tired. The next 2, people are going to completely disagree with this, but I think that these 2 fighters that can definitely make it to a decision with him, maybe give him some tough times throughout the fight, and make it like a hard-fought victory. I still think that Ilia Topuria would beat these guys, but I think that these 2 both hold the chance of making it to a decision and also hold the chance of finishing Ilia Topuria throughout the fights. I've got Gene Silva and Mauricio Ruffi in this. I think Gene, he would be a really difficult stylistic matchup for Ilia. I don't think that Ilia would fight anyone with the same style matchup as Gene Silva. He's the only person that Ilia would fight that has elite-level counterpunching with insane reflexes. The only other person who I would say has decent counterpunching like Gene Silva would be a Dustin Poirier. But at this point in his career, he's not fast enough anymore. He doesn't have the same quick reflexes that Gene Silva does. The other thing about Gene Silva is he's got the very similar build to Ilia Topuria, very similar size. And everyone that Ilia's been beating has been a fighter with very high output who fights off the front foot. So it would be interesting to see what he does with a guy with low output, crazy power, and good counterpunching and great wrestling defense like Gene Silva. Because we don't really see Ilia Topuria fight these people that aren't trying to pepper at him like a Volk or a Holloway. we don't see him fight the person who's going to be on the back foot waiting for him to throw and catching him in the middle of combination. And that's exactly what Gene Silva is going to do. And it'd be interesting to see what that does to Ilia Topuria'S usual striking style, because he's a very big on the long combinations. And it'd be interesting to see if he was able to still get off those long combinations, knowing that Gene Silva is going to try and crack him in the middle of that. It would be it's just a really difficult thing to see whether he'd be deterred over the power of Gene Silva. And I think defensively, Gene Silva's got really good footwork. He's got great head movement. He throws dynamic strikes, a lot of spinning attacks. He's going to autism max it. I don't think we've got anyone who's going to try and autism max Ilia Topuria while Ilia's throwing a rose at his face. But I also think that the fact that he holds his hands so low is going to bait Ilia towards him. And either that bodes well for Ilia and he just sleeps him, or he's able to draw out a bad punch from Ilia Topuria. So I could see this being a decision with Gene Silva losing maybe 4 of the rounds, but looking good throughout it and getting sort of just out-jabbed, out-pointed by Ilia. Or I could see in the 4th and 5th round, the jabs to the body and the straights to the body from Ilia making him react and pulling his hands down, then maybe getting finished in that 4th or 5th round. But I don't see this being round 1 or 2 KO, because Gene Silva does not commit to punches unless you've fully committed to yours. So it would be such an interesting stylistic matchup, and I hope we do end up seeing it before it's all said and done for their careers. But the other person in this sort of bracket is his teammate Mauricio Rufy. A lot of people won't think that this makes any sense because he's literally unranked and he could have a massive wrestling deficiency. And he also holds his hands super far down. But I believe in the development of Mauricio Rufy. I think style-wise, most people aren't going to agree with me. This is probably the most difficult style for Topuria, just based on what his career has looked like in the past. Again, may not make sense, but I'll set the scene a little bit for you. But think about like the Volk situation. Volk early into his regional career, the only time he had ever been finished up until Islam finished him was by head kick in the regional career. And let's remember the second fight against Max Holloway. He got head kicked in the first round, almost finished in that as well. And then he ends up getting finished by Islam by head kick. I think we see a lot of similarities between the start of Ilia's career and Volk's, where Ilia was dropped by a head kick, not finished on the regional scene. He was dropped really bad on the regional scene by a head kick, and then Jai Herbert caught him with a head kick as well. And these are like, if you watch all of the 17 Ilia Topuria fights, these are the 2 points where the only 2 points where you see real moments of weakness for Ilia. And I think that Rufy is one of the most dynamic kickers. He has really good distance management. He likes to set up his kicks nicely. He'll have the range advantage on Ilia Topuria. He's got really good boxing, especially for his height, which I think will pose a lot of threats for Ilia. And he's going to be gigantic compared to Topuria. I think stylistically, he's one of the only fighters on this list that I could see finishing Topuria with a head kick. I think it would be likely that the way that this fight would actually go, I think it's likely that Rufy wins the first 2 rounds, maybe even hurting Topuria. Then the 3rd round, likely he just gasses out and gets finished in the 4th or 5th round. But I just had to put him this high up because I thought that if he's the only guy that I can see if he's one of the only guys on the list that I could see actually finishing Ilia Topuria, and I have like a method in my head that I could see Ilia getting finished by, that Mauricio Rufy could very well he could very well try and do to Topuria, right? I just think that he could be a problem in the future for Ilia Topuria, especially if they can rocket him up to a title shot. Moving on to one of the only fights I would say is like a 50-50 matchup for me. I would not know at this point who I'm going to pick. It's the Islam Makhachev fight. This would be a really difficult fight to pick. I see on Twitter a lot of highlights of Islam striking against Charles Oliveira, saying he's going to get slept in the first round. But he's a lot more educated with his offense nowadays. You never see him moving forward like that. You can see that in the Poirier fight. He lets Poirier come forward, and that's what he bases his attack off. And that's going to be very difficult for a guy like Ilia to deal with. It's sort of like that Gene Silva style without the one-punch KO power. And the thing is that he's so good at range with his body kicks and his head kicks that he's going to be keeping the X block active for Ilia Topuria. So he's not going to be constantly able to use his head movement to slip outside of your jabs. He'll be having to use his X block to constantly be moving around and just distracting him against using his constant offense that he usually will use. And I think Ilia is going to struggle with the strength of Makhachev in the clinch, and especially the shots that Makhachev can get against the cage. I think that if they fought, this is how I would pick the fight. If Ilia Topuria is fighting Islam at lightweight, I'm picking Topuria. If they're fighting at welterweight, I'm picking Makhachev. I think if Islam fights him at welterweight, he might be able to smudge him and sub him. But if he fights him at lightweight, I'm probably going to pick Ilia by KO. But I think that this is a very difficult fight. I think Islam's biggest chance isn't a decision. I think it's submission in the first 2 rounds. He would have to go in with the same sort of game plan that he had against Renato Moicano if he wanted to get a win over Ilia Topuria. And I could see him doing it as well. So that's why it's sort of like the only 50-50 matchup. I think that this would be a really fun fight. I think it would be very difficult to pick. But I do think that Ilia Topuria would take it if it was at lightweight. And if it was at welterweight, Islam's probably going to take it. But moving on to the last matchups, the ones that I think would consistently beat Ilia Topuria, it's a really good sign for Ilia because they're all welterweights. Every single one of the opponents I think that would beat him on a regular basis are all welterweights. I think all of the guys that I have on screen here, JDM, Bilal, Sean Brady, Shavkat Rakhmonov, I think all of them would completely smoke Ilia. I think, to be honest, I think Shavkat probably has the biggest chance of losing that fight. But honestly, I think moving up 3 divisions for Ilia is just too much for him at this point in his career. And Islam at 170, I think he has a decent chance against. But even that, I would favor Islam. And a lot of these guys I would pick to beat Islam at 170. So I think Ilia, his cap off is going to be at 170. But even then, there are people below here, like a Leon Edwards, I think I would pick Ilia Topuria to beat, or I wouldn't even say Joaquin Buckley. I think Ilia would struggle with Buckley. But yeah, I think where Ilia's strengths bottom out is definitely going to be at 170. Anyone at lightweight or featherweight, I think he beats them. I think he's going to have a generational run if he can stay and defend these 2 belts. So I'm looking forward to seeing what's coming up for him next. Let me know what you think the hardest matchups are for him. Do you think, out of the Gachi, Hooker, and Pimblett as well, who do you think would do the best out of those 3? I'm really interested to hear what you think in the comment section below. As always, like and subscribe, leave a comment, and I'll catch you in the next video. Peace.